additional abilities that would actually bring her much closer to the monk job than her original
Just drop
appearance.
the fucking bug.
Unbridled strength was, for example, a more modern
Yo,
interpretation
ladies,
of
if
the
you ever
focus
need like a
ability.
real man
By
to get
using
rid
one
of like the
ATB
spires
bar,
in your
we would
house,
see her increase
I'll
her
do
Q,
that. I'll just
boosting the
straight up
damage
throw it
dealt
over my
by
shoulder and just
non-attack.
drop their
And
ass.
much like some
I
interpretation
do it at work all the
focus,
time.
it could then be stacked, something that would
It
not only
really
increase
concerns the
damage output
customers,
further,
but you
it
know,
would grant Tifa
ain't no
access
bugs
to an
coming here, they know
ever-increasingly
better.
powerful finishing move, much like Masterful Blitz.
You know, it's
in
all
Final
fun and
Fantasy
games, so the
XIV.
human just gives
Two
you
of
the
these
butt
moves were
buster.
throwbacks. Omni Strike represented.
Oh boy, I'm excited about this one. What's going on, everybody? Rotted Hawk here again with some more Final Fantasy Union. Don't mind the blue void. That's just par for the course with Final Fantasy Union. But I'm excited about this one. If you guys have watched the streams for Stranger of Paradise, or really any RPG that gives me the option, I love my pugilist characters right next to the spear characters. That's why we did Dragoon first. But if I had my option of like, all right, you get 2 options for weapons as a class, what do you want? I want spears and well, specifically halberds, and then I want fists. So I'm excited to see the evolution here because, like, okay, the Dark Knight self-sacrificing with dark power to like do more damage, that makes sense. You know, white mage you heal, black mage you use the nature and the cursing. All these are very in their lane, and you know, I always talk about staying in your lane, but monks can be so many different ways, right? It wasn't always the case, but in Dragon Quest, I always had monks as like the multi-hitters. You know, they had that move like hits 4 random targets. Like, oh, that sucks. Yeah, it probably does suck if you have more than one target, and if you're fighting a boss, it's probably gonna do a lot of damage, right? What else is there? There was a bit of like in Metaphor, there was a reverse style where you know you just do like crazy physical damage, but you like snap your health bar off. That was my entire play style. Again, I had Hulkenberg because Hulkenberg is best girl and she will never leave my party. To tank for me, and maybe a little bit elemental damage because of her class and stuff, but. And then I had Stroll, who is best boy. And unfortunately, I had to make him a healer because I wanted to be the pugilist. And of course, it was a pain because, like, okay, I just hang out with some of the characters and then I level up their class and I can level that up. No, unfortunately, it was Catherine, who was a shows up based on story events character. A quote unquote random encounter like Zevran from Dragon Age. But that was a fun playstyle. What else was there? I've seen a few like charge character ideas. I think in like Blue Dragon with Maru Maru. I can't remember quite off the top of my head. It's been well over a decade and a half probably since I played Blue Dragon. What else? Monks were also kind of interesting in Etrian Odyssey. If you guys like that, I do have a big old playlist of Etrian Odyssey 5. I hopefully can get back into that once I clear out some games I haven't finished. But they had like a really cool aspect. Like, of course, they have that, like, you know, sacrifice my health for big damage recoil. But they also had an interesting one where they like bound body parts. So like, it's like you punch them in the throat or you like grab them by the neck to like stop them from using abilities that focused on their head. You can bind their arms, like stop claw attacks, or you can I think you could like bind feet too, like, you know, you step on their foot or you like break their ankle like in the Daredevil movie. And that would like stop them from fleeing and all like trample based abilities or something along those lines. But yeah, there's so many different ways you can go with the monk. So I'm really curious to see how this class has evolved. So let's get into it. Oh, I'm excited. Click please. There we go. Do not deny me my fisting. That sounds bad.
Throughout
does
the
not
years,
sound bad for me.
designers working on the Final Fantasy franchise have introduced countless jobs. Many have been inspired by high fantasy, granting players the ability to cast magic or play the role of the
I mean,
chivalrous
let's
knight.
be real. Like
But that's
monks
not always
were
been the case.
pretty much a
And
thing in
one such
D&D
job
for a long
that's
time.
always
Like
been a bit more grounded is the monk.
maybe not in like
Often
advanced
opting
D&D,
to
but
use their
definitely once they
bare
start
hands
opening
as
up
weapons,
classes.
Monks have been ever present since their debut appearance, and as the
This is another thing. The unarmed damage in Dragon Quest, it was so bad because you miss out on like enchanted weapons and things like that. That's always the downside. That's why in Pathfinder and like 3.5 D&D, you always had the Amulet Mighty Fist to compensate. But I think Dragon Quest 11 did better, where they gave Jade a bunch of like cool moves to like compensate for potentially low damage, or it was like based off a stat rather than like, so she didn't have like fists, she had claws as weapons, claws and spears, but all of her like fisticuff abilities were abilities, they weren't weapons. You could wield any weapon, she just knew kung fu.
franchise has evolved, so too has the application of monks.
Or you could just do
It
the
has
smart
seen
thing and
various
just add
established
fisticuff
traits
weapons,
grafted
just
to
add
numerous
knuckles.
playable characters such as Sabin Figaro and Totolotta.
The
There have
train
been countless moves and
suplex.
abilities added to help improve their
Oh, if I had a
damage-dealing utility.
nickel for
It means
every
that when looking at
RPG
the
that
monk as a whole,
suplex a train, I'd
even
have
though
2
core
pennies.
aspects have stayed the same,
You know, it's
there's
not a
also
lot,
been
but
lot
it's
of
crazy it
change over
happened
the years.
twice.
And throughout this
At
video,
least fought a
we'd
train,
like
I
to
should
take you on
say.
a rather expansive journey as we explore the rather unorthodox path of evolution taken across every
I was
single
wondering why
appearance
this one
of
was
the
like
monk
twice the
job.
length
It's
of
quite
the
well
others.
known that tabletop role-playing games were a source of inspiration for the creators working on the original Final Fantasy, and on that basis, the appearance of Monk as one of the 6 starting jobs made sense.
By the way,
as
God
it
bless
appeared as
Robert E.
part of the
Howard,
Dungeons
that
and
one
Dragons
Robert E.
Blackmoor
Howard fan that
campaign
made the
as a subclass
Barbarian.
of cleric.
He really
But what's
loved it, and I
interesting
respect him
is that
for
even
it.
though some aspects of the job were carried over into Final Fantasy, others were disregarded, and it helped to make the job a bit more original. Now, one of the core elements that made up the tabletop role-playing monk class was its loose association.
There are 2 additional subclasses of characters: monks, Order of Monastic Martial Arts, a subclass of clerics, which also combine the general attributes of thief and fighting man. Assassins, a subclass of thief. Clerics, characters with a wisdom score of not less than 15. Who, oh, that's right, they had weird fucking stats. Who also have a strength score of not less than 12 and a dexterity score not of less than 15. What? May elect to... Oh, I see. These are like stat requirements to become a monk. Okay, so they probably did this with like Fighter later, where like people just had so much of a play style for like a barbarian or a rager that they just made its own class, much like Monk here probably. Okay.
Association with religion. In some regards, this would see them appear as
Yeah,
similar
fuck
to
that
Christian
lawful
monks, as they would have an
alignment
alignment with
requirement,
holy.
because
But even
I
though they
am
would have
very
strong
much
proficiency
a
with almost all weapon types, they would
red
also
hot
have
blooded American
bonuses
man
when
that loves
fighting
his
with
freedom and
bare-handed, as well
individuality.
as strong
I prefer
internal
my
healing
pugilist
abilities and
chaotic,
martial techniques, something that made them appear
because they
closer
will
to
be the
Buddhist
weapon
monks.
themselves and no one can stop them and
When
their
work
ambitions.
began in earnest on what would become Final Fantasy, Koichi
Black
Ishii
belt.
came up with the notion of having a party and associated jobs for its members. Akitoshi Kawazu was then responsible for determining which jobs would feature, and he was drawn to the monk due to not just its ability to act as another physical damage-dealing job, but that it could be made quite
It's important.
unique in
1 tank,
comparison
1
to the
healer, 2
warrior phase
DPS.
due to its focus on unarmed combat as opposed to using weapons. However, whereas Dungeons & Dragons chose to use Christians and Buddhist monks as a source of inspiration, Kawazu looked a bit closer to home and opted to model the function of monks on Japanese martial artists. This was evidenced in numerous aspects of visual design, but also with gameplay application, as not only did the monk wear a gi, they also wore a black belt.
Anyone ever play
something
the
that has since gained a strong
there's like a
association with
first
Japanese
edition
martial arts.
Pathfinder conversion
The
for
gi
Final
itself was
Fantasy,
blue,
and there's
an element
one
that was not
subclass
as
where you can
common,
just charge
but
multiple
usage of
turns and
blue
go Super
gis
Saiyan.
had started to become adopted within Judo as a way of
Also,
distinguishing between
because I'll share like obscure RPGs as much as I can. That Final Fantasy conversion also has a really cool monk system where you can like apply bonuses and debuffs to your basic attacks, and it counts as a combo chain. It's a really cool idea.
between competitors. With the headband also
So like
incorporated
knees like
into the
-1
design,
attack plus
outside of the
1 to
EV blue
damage.
as opposed to white, it meant the standard monk design wasn't too dissimilar from the design used for Ryu in Street Fighter, who was based on Matsutatsu Oyama,
That was more of a Ken guy.
founder of Kyokushin Karate. Another interesting fact was that even though monks were billed as bare-handed fighters, they could also
If
use
we're going real,
staves
I'm more of
and
a Terry
nunchucks.
Bogard guy.
And in the case of the latter, nunchucks had a strong association with
Oh, my
Okinawan
class.
karate and kobudo.
I'm probably going to talk about fighting games a lot in this as well for obvious reasons, but I played a decent amount of King of Fighters 15. Crazy that there's 15 of them. But I'm trying to remember who I played a lot of. I played Terry. I tried Mai because Mai is best King of Fighters girl. And what was her name? I think I played Lady because she was a Rekka character, and I tend to like those. It's a very diverse palette.
It would also
Just
often
sticking
be
around.
advised for monks to make use of nunchucks until their fists were strong enough to deal more damage, and that was because their unarmed damage output was based on their character level as opposed to any of their
Oh.
attributes. Monks would also have their defensive stats associated with their level as opposed to the armor they wore, and this was because they
Oh,
were
yeah,
given
like
very
in
high HP
D&D.
and high vitality, allowing them to comparatively gain more HP per level than any of the other jobs. It would be possible to upgrade Monk to the Master
Oh
job
my
or
god, look at their
Super Monk, as it
chest!
was known in the Japanese version.
They're
but they
built
were
like that
almost
one,
identical
like,
in terms of
dolphin
stats and
superhero
performance in
Pokemon
combat, the only
from
difference
Scarlet and
being that
Violet.
they gained more magic defense when leveling up. It meant that even though there were no specific moves associated with monks or masters, this all provided a solid foundation, and some of the established traits were present in
Hey,
Final Fantasy II, despite the
fucking
concept
Tiamat,
of
dude.
characters having specific jobs being abandoned. One of the more subtle elements of Final Fantasy II came with the guest characters. Even though they could be molded just like
Yes.
the main playable cast, many of them came with specific weapons, traits, and attributes that associated them with certain jobs. And in the case of Joseph, it was quite clear that he was meant to be a subtle allusion to the monk. And that was because, upon joining the party, Joseph would come with his bare hand skill at level 2 and would fight unarmed. Further to this,
Oh, yeah.
Joseph would have
He's a
relatively
barbarian
high
woman, then.
HP, as well as high strength.
She looks like the
stamina,
chick from the original
agility,
Golden Axe
and this
games.
counterbalanced his low
One that had the high magic
intelligence,
stat.
spirit, and magic. Final Fantasy III saw the successful return of the job system,
Wind
and
Crystal.
Monk again appeared as one of the starter jobs obtained from the Wind Crystal.
I remember Papa
They would
Hawk
again
played
wear
a,
blue
a
gi,
good bit of
which would be
Bravely Default
accompanied by a
too, and he liked the
headband
monk
and
class.
down braces, and focus will be placed around them fighting bare-handed, with nunchucks available to provide early level boosts. But a few other aspects were adjusted to enhance how the job performed. The most notable was that unarmed damage was no longer associated with character level, as it would instead be tied to job level. Monks also had strength prioritized,
Okay.
but even though they had
Yeah, I
high
guess that makes
vitality
sense.
and agility, growth was middling
what
in
else
comparison to
what other
many of
classes
the
gonna
other
use
physical
unarmed?
jobs featured in the game. It meant that Monk had the potential to be useful, but there was little point continuing the job once the black belt became available. And if there was any doubt that there was an association with Japanese martial arts here, the black belt was known as the karateka in the Japanese version. They would function in the same way as the monk, able to use knuckles, even though they were still classified as nunchuck, to deal additional damage until the job level was high enough, but they would gain access to an ability called Focus.
Okay, I can't read that.
When used, this would allow black belts to deal increased
Dan,
damage
Karen,
by
Tim, and
channeling
Alex.
their
Great
thoughts
names.
at the cost of one turn. One charge would see damage output doubled, with a second charge seeing the output tripled, but if a third charge was attempted, the black belt would lose focus and have their HP halved as a consequence.
I kind of like that. One criticism I do have, I can't remember what game it was. It might have been Metaphor, where like you charge, you spend your turn to charge, and the damage is increased by 250%. The reason for that being it was actually a 0.5 increase of DPS, because like, okay, let's say you boost the, it was basically like 2.5 times damage with the charge. And the reason I like that is because it's still a little higher. Because if it's just like, you do double damage, well, great, I might as well just spend the last turn punching them, and the next turn just punch them again. But that was nice. I had that little bit of extra, you know?
With the
I made it
developers
worth it.
wanting to enhance their storytelling as the franchise entered into the 16-bit
Dang,
era,
oh boy.
jobs were mapped onto main cast members. But even though the monk did return, having been assigned to a supporting
I want to read that again. Can wield knuckles alongside bare hands. Access to focus, brace, and kick.
A character called Yang Fang
Dude,
Laden,
punch and kick was kind
there
of
were some
gnarly.
fundamental changes.
Pathfinder.
For one, there was a noticeable shift away from Japanese martial arts, as Yan's visual style was more akin to a kung fu practitioner than a karate doka. It would see the blue gi abandoned, as Yang was now shirtless, wore bright red trousers and a yellow sash, and had a shaved head with accompanying ponytail.
Another interesting rendition of a monk, and I will not stop sucking the sticks game. Pillars of Eternity 1. They had a very interesting thing where they had like a key pool, but it could only be filled if you take damage. It was like a wound counter system. And the reason they went with that is because they wanted to explore the reasons, lore-wise, why monks wear no clothes is because they want to take damage. They were basically masochist monks.
To further this,
or penance if you ever played Ultimate Alliance 2.
Or Shaolin monks, many of the other monks found in Fabul would also have dots on their heads, used to show the journey they had undertaken.
It was I say, for I am the heavenly Buddha.
How Yang performed in combat, as even though he would deal incredible damage unarmed, with damage reverting back to the Final Fantasy II method of being associated with strength, Yan could also use knuckles, as they were now classified as
also bad. I need to stop.
However, unlike previous games, knuckles
I'm sorry, I'm too excited to learn about fisting people. God damn it!
As opposed to increasing
damage. Stop saying it like that.
Would allow him to add elemental
Andy,
damage
Cindy, and Mindy.
Oh my attacks. God. Outside of this, Yan had access to focus, a move introduced in Final Fantasy III.
Are the three sister summons from Final Fantasy X an allusion to this? Because isn't that what they had? They had like the really tall one, they had the small one, and then the like round one. I'm gonna pull up the hold on. FF10 Sisters Aeon. Aeon's a good word. Oh my god, it is! The Maga Sisters.
Huh. As well as two new abilities called Brace and Kick. Focus would have a similar application,
that's cool.
Allowing Yang to miss a turn to deal double damage with his next attack. However, this ability was removed for the North American
I looked back over, what the shit?
Would then allow Yang to deal damage to every enemy, albeit with the individual damage reduced in comparison to a standard attack, and Brace would function as a much more effective version of the Defend command. Much of this would then be resurfaced when Yan appeared in re-releases, as well as Final
punching
Fantasy
a rock
Interlude and the After Years. However, there would be a few enhancements, such as Focus being upgraded to Deadly if the Disciplined Armband was equipped. Despite the success of Final Fantasy IV, there were wholesale changes made throughout the development of Final Fantasy V, and one of the most important was the reintroduction of a job system that would allow characters to change their combat application on the fly. As part of
Ferris is the pirate captain that everyone thought was a guy, right? It was actually like a really hot girl.
What was seen would end up being a consolidation of traits introduced.
Can I see Ferris in a Chinese dress? That'd be really cool.
There being 5 playable characters, there were 5 designs, and this
they went the Ranma one half-ass round.
As Bart's and Galuf's appearances were near identical outside of having hair and Bart's wearing a jacket. The female characters would also wear outfits inspired by Chinese martial arts, with Lena wearing a Chi Pao just like Chun-Li, who had become immensely popular following the release of Street Fighter II the previous year. However, despite this change, monks reverted back to using bare hands, and Final Fantasy V actually represented the first game where they could not use any other weapons. As such, their damage was based on character level, just like in the original Final Fantasy. Kick was inherited from Final Fantasy
a thing from D&D,
but now able to deal full damage
where your fist damage went up in dice
and Focus featured simpler mechanics. But while Brace was removed, it was replaced by a new ability called Chakra. This would be a very unsubtle reference to Hinduism and Buddhism, as they're the focal point of numerous meditative practices used to cleanse and heal an individual's body and mind. In Final Fantasy V, it was used in a similar fashion, as not only would it heal, but it would remove the poison and darkness.
That was another thing I thought was always weird. It's like they have like this weird like self-heal ability in like a lot of games, but it was just like kind of, it always felt out of place. But I mean, it felt out of place, but it also made sense in a weird, if that makes sense.
Monks would also gain access to passive abilities such as counter and percentage.
Yeah, it's just like a thing they threw in because they do like another skill or something.
Final Fantasy VI saw the monk job used in a similar fashion to Final Fantasy IV, as it was
assigned vitality and strength. Hell yeah, that's all you need.
The game's supporting cast. But what we got to see was far more expansive than any previous iteration of the monk, and that applied to almost every facet
This
of
is
the
the
job.
suplex in the
The design of Sabin incorporated elements seen with Yan, Bart, and Galuf, as it was once again more aligned with a kung fu practitioner, and even though he wasn't bald, Sabin also sported a ponytail. In FMVs, we also got to see Sabin shirtless, just like Galuf. Outside of that, Sabin would have high strength and high HP, and could use knuckles, but unlike previous
This
iterations
dude looks
of
like
the
he's
job,
about to call me a
damage output was
jabroni in a
now
locker
aligned with the
room.
weapon
I'm not
wielder,
gonna
and
lie.
meant there was no benefit to fighting barehanded. Now, even though Yan was involved with the story in Final Fantasy IV, from a narrative perspective, there wasn't really anything that happened that was inherently related to him being a monk. It wasn't too dissimilar for Sabin, but we did get to learn that he was the prized pupil of a martial artist called Duncan Harcourt. It was via Duncan that Sabin would learn Blitz, and this would represent a significant evolution for the monk. By using Blitz, players would need to input memorized button commands, a nod to the fighting game scene. And this would grant access to a wide array of moves that could be learned as Sabin leveled up.
I love
There would be 18
that.
total, with damage aligned
Dude, did
with
they
Sabin's
just go
magic
ham on
stat,
like all the
first time
classes
this
for
has ever
Final
been
Fantasy
relevant to
VI?
monks, and they provided
And
Sabin
everyone
with a
sucks
lot of
Final Fantasy
application.
VII's dick.
The most basic, Raging Fist, would see Sabin unleash a small combination attack, while Aura Cannon would deal holy elemental damage, bringing back a subtle trait introduced with Yan. Meteor Strike would deal high physical damage to a single enemy, and has since become quite famous due to a
Yes!
certain train,
Boom!
while
Fuck you,
Rising
Ghost
Phoenix would allow
Train!
Sabin to deal fire elemental
Nothing
damage.
is greater than the
On
humans.
top of this, there was also Razor Gale, which would deal wind elemental damage, Phantom
Why? Like, I get it's called Rising Phoenix, so the fire makes sense. Why are they flaming versions of him getting all swooply?
Rush, which would deal non-elemental damage and ignore magic defense, as well as Chakra, which now healed other party members and cured an increased array of ailments, and Soul Spiral, which would restore HP and MP of other party members and cure even more status effects, but would come at the cost of removing Sabin from the battle. There was also an interesting nuance associated with Blitz.
It's like when a Pokemon uses fly and the enemy dies before he lands.
Due to the damage output of Blitz being associated with magic, Tiger Fang would be preferable for increased damage output. With everything combined, it meant Sabin represented an incredible update to the monk framework, and it would be referenced by many monks that would appear throughout the years, including the one that would follow straight after.
Oh yeah, oh geez.
When
I love
development
that.
started on Final Fantasy VII, there were
Yeah,
plans
here
for
we
each
go.
playable character to have an associated job. Some of these plans could still be seen within the final version, such as Sid
hold
being
on.
a Dragoon, and
Lot Reels Limit Break shows off many
some of these
abilities.
plans could still be seen within the
Oh,
final
I got the
version,
Waka
such as Sid being a
flashbacks.
Dragoon and Aerith being a Geomancer, but none epitomised this more than Tifa Lockhart. In early planning documents, Tifa was planned to be a shooter, a nod to shoot wrestling, which had taken Japan by storm throughout the 1970s.
Hell yeah.
By the time the final product had been released, even though this official designation was removed, Tifa's association with the monk job was quite clear. However, that's not to say there weren't some significant changes. For example, due to the change in
It's
thematic
either really
design,
good or
Tifa's
really bad,
appearance
depending on the
was
game.
much more modern and on the surface.
But in
that
Final
made it
Fantasy,
seem
it tends
quite
to be
unlike
good. It
any
was the God
previous
Skill in
game.
13, I know
However,
that.
she did still wear a tank top like Sabin, had a black belt and red braces, much like the earlier games, and sported
technically
a long
she has a black
ponytail that was
belt.
designed to mirror a dolphin. Tifa also continued on with the
Not
narrative
the
theme
dolphin blow.
introduced with Sabin, as it was revealed that she learnt her martial arts from a master called Zangan, but when it came to gameplay, we got to see some more interesting deviations. Up until this point, monks had always had a strong focus on having high HP,
Dude.
high strength,
I want to make
high
like...
vitality.
I need to figure out Foundry a lot better. Because I just want to do like a fight like this. Or like a Bayonetta intro slash Dead Fantasy vibe. Where just like the fight continues on, but you just keep like falling, you know? Just like that kind of like badass, we just keep falling till the end. Or another example is the Titan fight in Final Fantasy 16. I have many gripes about that game, but the cinematics of the Titan fight are just chef's
With
kiss.
agility or an equivalent stat seen as a secondary.
I just wish you know I
However,
could play
in
the
this
game that
particular
isn't
game,
being a
even though
meat
Tifa
sponge.
did have high strength, HP, and dexterity relative to
And
her other
QTs.
stats, most were middling
God's
as compared to
hand.
the other characters in the roster, and
The
her
perfect
vitality
example why
was one of the
game
worst.
journos need to be good at
Tifa
video
could
games.
also not fight barehanded, with
God
the damage
hand.
output linked with the knuckles she wore, and this introduced a weird micro trend, as much like Sabin, it could be argued that Tifa's ultimate weapon, Premium Heart, isn't as useful as her second strongest weapon, God's Hand. Within traditional combat, Tifa would perform much like any
The
other character in
frogs,
the game,
dude!
with no inherently unique abilities. But there were numerous allusions to the monk Howl's
Yeah, I had a
Limit
friend,
Break,
Doom. He's
the
been on
first
some of the
being that it
earlier
was
streams
interactive.
in my
However,
streaming
unlike
career.
Sabin's, which required the player to memorize
Quotations.
input commands,
But
players would need to use their reactions on a slot reel.
he had like his profile picture was like the frog from Final Fantasy VII, and he didn't know what it was from. I was like, dude, that's from Final Fantasy. I was more of a Kecleon guy from Lost Odyssey. Was it Kecleon? I think I was. I think so.
There
What
were
they
no
called him.
defensive moves available to Tifa, but two of the moves,
Oh,
Raging
hands
Fist
down,
and
the
Meteor
best
Strike,
enemy
did pay direct
that
reference
you
to
can
Sabin.
franchise.
Somersault,
Poo
Water Kick,
Snake.
Dolphin Blow, and Final Heaven were then unique to Tifa.
Suplex
Two
the board.
martial artists would then be part of
Boom!
the playable roster of Before Crisis, dubbed Jugatu and Maru within Last Order. They would both have high HP, attack, and defense, and would draw upon Tifa's weapon set to improve their performance in combat. Final Fantasy Tactics reverted back to featuring a comprehensive job system, but even though Monk would
attack,
feature, it would
Martial
no longer be a
arts
starting
mirror a
job.
lot of savings
Instead, it could only be accessed after Knight had been upgraded, and upon doing so, players
Knight?
would gain access to one of the best offensive jobs
I
in
get
the
like
game.
white, well, maybe like White Mage
Monks
Knight.
would have high base attack and high HP, and their support ability would increase the effectiveness of their barehanded attacks. And this will be crucial, as they would not be able to wield any weapons. Instead, damage will be based upon a calculation that would take into consideration a unit's physical attack value and their bravery. Alongside this, monks would gain access to various martial arts.
Spin
and the
fist,
range of
repeating
moves
fist,
available would
wave
have clear
fist, earth
similarities
slash
with
secret
Sabin,
fist,
even if the way they
stigma
were accessed
magic.
was now much more straightforward.
Oh, revive.
Chakra, Pummel, Aura Blast, and Stigma Magic would act as equivalents of Raging Fist, Aura Cannon,
Wait,
and
Stigma
Soul
magic
Spiral.
like
But there
HP
were also some
casting?
new moves such as Doom Fist, which hit a pressure point to invite a slow, certain death via Doom, Shockwave, an Earth Elemental attack,
Oh,
and
that's the
Revive,
this is where
which
you
could bring
fall
an ally
down.
back from the KO status. When combined with reaction abilities such as Counter and First
You're
Strike,
already
an
dead.
essential concept in martial arts called Sino-Sen, which relates to taking a preemptive action the instant an action is about to be launched upon you, it made this iteration of the monk pretty
Yes.
compelling.
Okay, yeah, it looks
In
like it
Final
does
Fantasy
damage
VIII,
you.
Just as had been the case
Oh.
in Final Fantasy VII, certain characters featured allusions to
Is a
prominent
near
jobs of the
direct
past,
tribute.
and in the case of the monk, players had to look no further than Zell.
Oh, he
Didn't
looks like a
learn
tool.
anything interesting about how Zell learned his martial
I mean,
arts.
everybody
Much
but
like Tifa and
Quintus or
Sabin,
whatever.
his damage
Quistis
output was
is. It
related
looks
to
like a
the knuckles
tool.
that were equipped.
Quistis is actually really
For
hot.
Jewel, we would also get to see a near direct
It
tribute
might
to
be hot for
Sabin's
teacher.
Blitz, as to deliver moves through Zell's Limit Break, players would need to input button combinations within an allotted amount of time.
Oh yeah.
However, unlike Blitz, where players would only perform one move, with Jewel, they could keep
I've
using
never
moves
seen
until the
anybody,
time limit
like,
expired.
I've never seen a
Given the
person or
volume of
character
moves
I like that has a
available,
face tat.
There's
It's
a
always
mixture
just a
of
bad idea.
historical and new moves, with Punch Rush, Meteor Strike, Dolphin Blow, Earth Slash, and Final Heaven
Neck tats,
being
that's
brought
just
forward from Final Fantasy
that's just
VI,
one of the four
7,
horsemen
and
of Baldur's
Tactics.
Gate. But
And with the player required to collect magazines to learn new moves, it served as a nice evolution
my
for what had
God.
become the more modern appearance
boy, you
of monks.
gonna show him man's man? He's gonna learn
Even
some
though
grappling
Final
moves.
Fantasy IX would have a heavy focus on nostalgia, and specific jobs will be assigned to named characters, none of them were designated as a monk. But that's not to say there weren't allusions to the venerable job, and many of them could be found when looking
Oh my
deeper
God.
at Amaranth. Amaranth would be restricted to using claws, a categorization of weapon that would include many classic monk weapons, such as the Kaiser Knuckles and Tiger Fangs.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like
and like many of
in
the other
Dragon
modern
Quest, I always see people using claws. For like, if it's like a class that can have, I think it's usually like thieves or mainly martial artists. But I was always more of a staff guy. I love the quarterstaff, and I love the spear in Dragon Quest 9. Claws are okay. I had one on my the first time I ever played it. I had a thief who went in the gladiator and he ripped shit up with claws.
iterations, they would be used as a primary source of calculating damage output. Amaranth would also have very high HP and strength, also featuring decent speed, and would have access to numerous monk abilities, including Chakra, Countdown, which would inflict the Doom status, and Revive, both of which had just been
Myro
associated
Motion
with
Neuro.
monks in Final Fantasy Tactics. Final Fantasy X adopted a similar approach, with allusions to
I
various
guess
jobs
Riku,
unique
yeah.
throughout the various characters.
She was a very
And in the
interesting
case of Monk,
character.
The strongest affinity could actually be seen with Riku.
Where she could just like one-shot
Much like
machines by
Amaranth,
stealing.
She would also be restricted to using claws, But many notable monk weapons will be housed within this category, and our ultimate weapon would be
Not
the
gonna
God
lie,
Hand.
out of all the
But
like
outside of having a
waifus,
ponytail,
Riku's
there
probably the
wasn't much
lowest
else
on
that
my.
positioned Riku as a monk.
Of all the Final
She was
Fantasy
much
X
more
waifus,
closely
Riku's
aligned
probably on
with
the
thief
bottom.
and chemist jobs.
Lulu, Pain,
It wouldn't be
Yuna.
until Final Fantasy XI that players would bear witness to another strong and purposeful showing of the monk, as not only did it
I'm also
appear as one
curious
of these
about
starter
this.
jobs available to players right from the get-go, but we also got to see a bit of narrative exposition.
Yeah, because
Numerous monks would be
as
encountered
I've
as
mentioned
part
in previous videos, like Final Fantasy XI is like the dead MMO, but they had a lot of good ideas for their classes.
of the story, such as the legendary Matt, who would allow players to push beyond their limits. But perhaps the strongest came via Cornelia. A human from Bastok, Cornelia sought training in the martial arts as a way of seeking revenge, and after being trained by Ogby, she would end up gaining incredible strength, even being recruited to Bastok's elite guard, the Mithril Musketeers. When using the job themselves,
Mithril
players would see a
Musketeers.
faithful interpretation that pulled on many past iterations to create something original.
Dude,
This would
imagine
be
that, right?
evidenced
You're
across
like
almost
your
every
buddies and you
aspect
are
of the
playing an
job,
MMO,
with
but you're
damage
also
serving
playing
as
a
a
fighting
prominent
game.
example. And that was because, unlike other jobs featured in Final Fantasy XI, hand-to-hand damage and delay had a different damage calculation. It would see hand-to-hand skill combined with damage provided by the weapon, allowing monks to still deal damage even if they chose not to equip a hand-to-hand weapon.
I mean, it's just so
Monks
much
would
easier
also
to have
benefit
fist
from passive
weapons.
traits that would increase the effectiveness of their hand-to-hand combat, speed up combinations, and allowing their combinations to contain both
They
fists
make them attack
as well
faster
as
to up the
kicks.
deeps.
Traits would also include the ability to counter, apply a tactical guard, which kind of
Look,
resurfaced
they
the
got
brace
fucking
ability
count.
seen in Final
They
Fantasy
have
IV,
animation
as well as
counters
providing percentage increases to their maximum HP.
or cancels.
Outside of this, monks would gain access to a huge array of abilities and weapon skills, which would act as an incredible
Like that
tribute.
one guy in
This
the
included
studio
the
that
Light
just really wanted to
Boost,
make a fighting game and
Focus,
they just let him
and
go all
Chakra,
out.
which would now add auto regen.
We all know that the best fighters are Dojin
as well as
fighters.
Raging Fist, Spinning Attack, and Final Heaven. And there were also
That's
a
the
whole
real
load of new
Tism
moves
fighters.
introduced. This included, but was not limited to, Key Blast, 1-inch Punch, Asuran Fist, Shoulder Tackle, and the Tornado Kick.
Done.
Monk would next be seen within Final Fantasy Tactics Advance, but its appearance was quite
Middling
unorthodox,
stats.
as there was no quintessential monk. Instead, players had
Exercise
access to
and
the
Holy
White
Sign.
Monk, which had a much stronger alignment to the holy element, and it was exclusive to the
I don't know who these
Bangaris.
geeses are,
Unlike
but
monks in
apparently they
Tactics,
just have really
even
good
though there wasn't
classes.
emphasis placed on
Aren't they also the
HP, attack,
Dragoons?
and magic power, white monks had middling stats in comparison to other jobs. They could also equip knuckles as opposed to fighting barehanded, and they would be used to gain access to a variety of moves. Some were pulled directly from tactics such as Whirlwind, Earthrender, and Revive, whereas others such as Chakra and Far Fist, which was a variant of Aura Cannon, pulled from the job's illustrious past. But due to the holy alignment, White Monk also introduced two new moves, Exercise and Holy Sign. White Monks would resurface in Tactics A2, Tactics S, and Crystal Defenders with similar application, and they would also appear
Oh
as
my
regular monk
God.
enemies in Revenant Wings.
They made a
where they could
fucking
even use
balloons
auto
tower
regen,
defense
much like
Final
ammo.
Fantasy. Of course they did.
Final Fantasy Tactics
Final
A2
Fantasy is
would
like
also
Mario, they
introduce
just have this
another
game for every
variant of
genre.
monk, the Master Monk. This
Where's
was no
the
doubt meant
Final
as a
Fantasy
throwback
visual
to the
novel, you know?
earliest days of the job, where Master acted as an upgrade for
sure they
Monk
got a
in the original
platformer.
Final Fantasy, and that was the role
Some
it played
Dragoon like
here,
platformer or
acting as
something.
an upgrade for the White Monk. It meant some moves were inherited, such as Holy Strike, and others were pulled in to complete the set, such as Lifebane, which could inflict doom, and Inner Focus, which had a similar application to Chakra. The other bonus for Master Monks is that even though they would learn their moves from poles,
Oh my
they would
god,
receive
that's
a significant
schnoz.
damage boost if fighting barehanded.
Just beat him with your
When
stick.
Final Fantasy XII released, its licensed board system created an experience that was quite similar to Final Fantasy II.
Or with
It meant the
poles. Hold
characters could be
on.
molded into certain job archetypes, but there was
Pugilist
no real
or
steer towards any
staffs.
particular path of development. The
Use some
consequence,
more pole
according
arms.
to Hiroyuki Ito, was that most players just ended up creating 6 identical characters as it presented the easiest path to victory. And so,
Yeah.
when work started on what would become Final Fantasy XII, the International Zodiac job system, Ito decided to make a fundamental change that would see the reintroduction of
No, dude, you don't understand, okay? That's not how people work. Like, oh, we just make other. No, I'm weird, okay? I like having everybody be super specialized. People will learn to break the fuck out of your game. They will find the craziest combo and they will apply that to everybody.
jobs. Monk was amongst the jobs chosen as part of this reshuffle, and it was associated with Virgo. It would see characters
Ooh,
able to
what
fight
the fuck?
barehanded or with poles, much like in Tactics A2, and they would
Gosh. Okay, so Hunter, yeah, White Mage, Samurai, Black Mage, Archer, Breaker. Oh yeah, that Breaker from Stranger Paradise. Time Mage, Red Mage, Mechanist. Okay, all those are fine. What's an Ulan?
It would see characters able to fight barehanded or with poles, much like in Tactics A2, and they would be
Oh,
given
yeah.
high HP as well as the
I
ability
hate
to
that
learn
techniques
Brawler
are
and
spelled like
every
that.
single battle or augment, which would see significant increases to their physical attack damage. This would then play in with the damage calculation, which was based
That's
on
a
a
good name for
combination
it.
of strength and character level. This would end up being a major defining trait, as there weren't many quintessential monk abilities.
See, it's really
present
hard to
within
just
the original
balance
game.
not having a
However,
weapon
monk would
because you
still
have to make
access
sure it's enough
revive,
damage, but not
focus,
enough
and
that it gets
swiftness,
crazy
but
and they
none
can like
were
break it.
exclusive to the job. As it was designed as a modern-day interpretation of the classic Final Fantasy game, the Four Heroes of
Fighter
Light was
Crown
built around a pretty
leans closer
comprehensive
to
job
that of
system
a
called
monk.
the Crown System. It would bring
With
back
anything.
many classic jobs, but even though there was a monk amongst the selection, its utility was completely different.
Why is the top of the head a skull?
Have abilities that were more aligned with the Necromancer job, as they had the ability to raise their dead allies and even summon an army of ghosts. Due to this shift, the monk was instead transplanted over to the Fighter Crown, and it was here that we would see a very faithful interpretation. Fighters could wield all types of weapons, including spears, axes, and even
Oh, yeah.
bows, but their proficiency was low with the majority of them, as they were intended to fight barehanded. As such, they had a passive trait that would see their unarmed
That
damage
gear thing reminds me because I'm thinking like, could the gi be like its own item and like what you basically whatever you outfit your character as, that's what like they're good at. Does anyone remember the Dragon Quest IX commercials with Seth Green? Where it's all about like you can make your character look like whatever you want. I'm wearing a hat. Those ads. And then I went to play as like stats. Like there are definitely stats on equipment, so some of them are better than others. Like it's really funny when you put your canonical tomboy in a bunny suit because your friend threatens your life. But there wasn't that much use of wearing the bunny outfit.
boosted,
especially when you had
based
DS
on their strength
graphics.
stat, which was relatively high, along with their HP in comparison to other
Shining
crowns.
axe. That's a
Alongside
pretty
this,
golden axe right
fighters
there.
had access to Combat, which was a version of Raging Fists, Jugular, which pulled from the enhanced version of Focus seen in Final Fantasy XI, allowing the fighter to perform a
I
critical
don't like
hit,
the fact it's
and
called
Chakra.
jugular.
Fighters would then have access to a move called Frenzy Fu, a fire-based combo, to deal heavy damage.
Nice.
Final Fantasy XIII had limited focus on jobs, opting to instead use roles that were not exclusive to any character. But there was still an allusion to the monk, as Snow Villiers attacked barehanded,
Oh yeah, Snow,
receiving
my
his power
boy,
from
Snow.
ornaments found within his coats. But he
I
also
love
had
Snow.
high
I'm the
HP and
biggest
strength
Snow
in comparison to
fanboy.
other party members. In Lightning Returns, Lightning could also wear the martial monk
I love
garb,
it. I
which
love
had a
his role
similar colour
in the
scheme to
party.
the famed outfit worn by Bruce Lee in Game
Him
of
and
Death. It would
Fang.
grant Lightning the soul
The
of
two
the fighter,
sentinels.
boosting her HP by 10% and physical damage by 5%, and she would also gain access to the Whirlwind Kick, a nod to the Tornado Kick introduced in Final Fantasy XI. Knights of the Crystals, a spin-off game that acted as an extension of the Ivalice franchise,
Is this a
featured
card
huge
game?
array of jobs, and alongside the monk, we also got to see quite a few variants. The basic male monk will be based on Yan, even including the random sword he carried in the Amano concept art, and they would have access to Rapid Fire Fist.
Carrying a
this
sword
were the
doesn't
Fire
use it.
Monk, Ice
That's a
Monk,
power
and
play.
Thunder Monk, each able to perform an elemental punch, perhaps a nod
I
back
like
to
the
Yan
recolors
again,
for them.
and the notion of
Has a
providing
little cultural
utility through
element.
the equipping of different weapons. Acting as an extension to Monk, there was the Super Monk, Master Monk, and Fist Master, with the martial artist
The
acting as
Fist
the most
Master.
advanced iteration. Final Fantasy Dimensions was designed as a further extension of creating a modern-day Final Fantasy experience using traditional elements, bringing that design ethos to mobile devices. But unlike the Four Heroes of Light, it was much more literal with its implementation. It would see Monk available to players as one of the starter jobs, and the individual character designs had a clear similarity to what was seen in Final Fantasy V. Monks would have high HP, high strength, and high vitality, and they would be able
And
to
arts
equip
and red
claws to
magic.
increase their damage, with God's hands acting as the most powerful.
Ooh, against
In
humans
addition,
and
Monks
demons.
would gain access to numerous
I like
abilities,
that.
such as Kick and Focus, which would harken back to that initial appearance as it could be charged multiple times, as well as Aura Blast, Chakra, and Raging Fist.
5-member party.
Final Fantasy XIV has featured the monk job ever since the first iteration, and it would act as an extension of the Pugilist class. From a lore perspective,
Okay.
we got perhaps the most depth we'd ever seen in relation to the job. Although there was still a focus around people learning a rare martial form, we got to understand that much of it centered around unlocking their chakra. As we have seen many times before, monks will be able to wield knuckles, and their
So one lore idea I had for like a pugilist, this is me after trying desperately to find Shadow Skill to watch and just listening to the music religiously, was it was very much a spiritual art, and so like you had to go down like one path, so like ambition, like harmony, basically something that like turbo dedicates you to the point where like your spirit is emboldened and strives constantly. You know, it could be other things like love or justice, things like that. And they would all have like different fighting styles. Basically a way to like dedicate yourself to like your personal cause, and you would have such willpower with your cause that would direct you to a fighting style. A bit hard to
primary
explain,
attribute would be
but
strength, used to boost their attack power. They would also have access to many abilities, such as Masterful Blitz, which contain moves like Rising Phoenix and Phantom Rush, as well as the Final Heaven Limit Break. Many other abilities would also be inherited from Final Fantasy XI, such as Dragon Kick, Shoulder Tackle, and Tornado Kick. There were also a few actions that would have internal focus, such as Second Wind, which would restore HP, and Deep Meditation, which would increase the chance of inflicting critical damage.
grants 80% chance that chakra will open upon dealing critical damage. What does that mean, chakra will open? Are they pulling a Rock Lee? Fifth gate
Chakra
open?
would then become very integral to the job following a rework thanks to the job gauge, and this would be linked to the monk's ability to perform strong offensive abilities such as Forbidden Chakra and Enlightenment. Final Fantasy Type 0 featured an extensive cast of characters, each of which was aligned with a specific weapon type. As such, many of them adopted traits often seen with the classic jobs.
Oh, is he the bad boy? Is he the hooligan?
Knuckles, the natural association was monk. However, despite the association being pretty
Oh
obvious,
god, yeah, I forgot how fucked the camera is in this game.
From previous monks, and there were almost no inherited moves. 8's combat would be based around the use of stances, which would change gameplay and grant access to specific moves. Wildfire stance,
okay,
for example,
I kind of like that too.
8 able to fire a key blast.
Let's think about monk. It's a very versatile role.
Stance would see 8 able to execute rapid punch combinations. In terms of abilities, there were many, but the one that drew from the past was Phantom Rush.
What was I heard about this camera? It's like someone just smeared Vaseline all over it. Like, yeah, that checks out.
Allowing 8 to dodge all incoming
Oh, I'm sorry, you
attacks.
wanted motion blur off? What if we just made the whole
As
world
Final
motion
Fantasy
blur for a
Airborne
second?
Brigade acted as another throwback game, it was no surprise to see Monk featured as one of the starter jobs. They would fight
I
using
hate
their
it.
bare
Soulless
hands, but could
eyes.
also use staves,
It reminds me of
and their damage output would be based
Coraline.
on their strength
Except
attribute,
I don't get
as
a
opposed to any other
legally
factors.
distinct
But
mom.
what made this particular job pretty special in the context of the evolution was that it had an extensive amount of abilities, and although there were some new abilities introduced, many were clear references to the past. It would see access given to abilities introduced from all across the franchise, from the job's early days such as Kick, Aeroblast and Phantom Rush, through to the more modern iterations with abilities such as Dragon Kick and 1-inch Punch. The upgraded job, Black Belt, then took things further, incorporating numerous abilities housed within the limit break of Zell, such as Heel Drop and Meteor Barret.
Heel drop, is that where you just like suplex your teammate, but you got like that perk from Borderlands that you shoot to heal?
Traditional. It would see characters able to equip knuckles and staves, with HP and strength the standout attributes. Within their martial arts abilities, they would also gain access to numerous offensive and internal abilities, many of which emphasize the connection between the Bravely and Final Fantasy franchises. Invigorate, for example, was adapted from Focus, as it allowed the character to raise their physical attack for 2 turns. But just like when it was introduced in Final Fantasy III, if it failed, the character would take a hit to their own HP. Monks could also use Inner Alchemy, a version of Chakra, and had passive enhancements to increase their maximum HP, and many of these aspects were attained when the monk job returned in Bravely 2nd and Bravely Default 2.
Oh my god, the hair.
Final Fantasy Record Keeper has featured numerous forms of monk, including but not limited to the default job. This appeared as one of the core jobs, but due to this, it was quite poor in comparison to many of the other characters that could be obtained. As such, it offered limited stat growth, and there was only one soul break,
all enemies.
But it did introduce something, as alongside
That's a big word.
Fists, monks could also wield daggers. Alongside the monk, Record
Guess
Keeper
that checks
also
out.
featured references to many of the other monks that have appeared throughout the history of the franchise, including the likes of Tifa and Ida, with Yosef and Amrad also being positioned
Oh right, the
as
chick from
monks.
14. No,
In
I don't
Final
think anyone
Fantasy
gives a shit
Explorers,
about.
the monk was one of the first jobs made available to the player. It would allow players to focus on damage dealing, which would primarily come via equipping Knuckles, but they could also use katanas and clubs. Their unique ability would
I
be
see you had
Boost,
an action
which would
element
act
now.
as a
Now we're
dynamic
talking.
interpretation of focus, with the player able to hold the button down to deal more damage. They would also be able to use Inner Peace, a move that replicated the utility of Brace, as when it was used, it would prevent the player from being knocked back by the majority of
Oh
enemy
god.
attacks.
Yeah, don't
Unlike
fight the horse from
predecessor,
behind.
Final Fantasy Dimensions 2
I learned that
dispersed with the
last night on
traditional job
stream.
system, with many of those jobs instead appearing as costumes that had limited impact on gameplay. Monk did, however, appear as an Earth Elemental Eidolon that could be wielded by Mena, and its design was inspired by Ursula
That's
from Final
actually really
Fantasy IV:
sick.
The After Years.
That's
who
a
was
really
Yumi's
sick
daughter.
design.
Before it was shut down, Mobius Final Fantasy had featured many different iterations of Monk, with the most basic, the Trainee Monk, being introduced alongside a whole host of potential
Boom.
evolutions. This basic job
Oh yeah,
would
combo the
receive
shit out
numerous
of
HP
him.
and attack boosts, while also granting access to ever
Oh yeah, he's going again.
With
Yeah.
its ultimate ability, Fists of Fury, only just introduced in Record Keeper as a move associated with Yosef. Trainee Monk could then be evolved into Monk, Pugilist, or Grappler. Monk could then further be
Oh.
upgraded to Battle Monk and Master Monk, and its ultimate ability, Blurred Strikes, would add auto regen. Pugilist would be upgraded to Karateka, an ode back to the original incarnations of the job, as well as the God Hand job, the first time this name had ever been used in this manner. Its ultimate ability would also be Tornado Kick. Grappler could be upgraded to Wrestler and Pancratiast, and served
Oh.
as a subtle nod back to the original intention for Tifa, who was meant to be a shield fighter.
Suplex.
Its move would be Spearing Tackle and would inflict stun. Alongside this, Master
Hidden
Monk would
spear.
also be made into an independent job. This would be upgradable to 2 new jobs called
I've never
Arslan
heard of
and
this game, but
Varga,
it's already
and its
intriguing
ultimate
me.
ability would be
This
Final
monk
Heaven.
gameplay.
There was also the Hermit, which could be upgraded to Truth Seeker and Daoshi, and plenty of legendary jobs such as the Moogle Suit, Unbroken Hero that cemented the connection between Monk and Snow,
No,
Deep
the
Diver, which led from the Dolphin
FF10
Association presented in Final
flashbacks.
Fantasy VII, Vanadiel Monk, which used Asuran Fist as its ultimate, and the Agent of Scarlet Woe, which oddly established a connection between Vincent and the Monk job. Brave Exvius adopted a similar approach, aligning a few variants of the Monk job
And it's
with
been in a
specific
few
characters
games.
such as Goken, Berg, and Shao. Combined, they adopted quite a few different traits and abilities. Berg, for example, had a basic ability set that was nearly identical to that used by Yan.
A
as he could
defense
use
buff?
Kick, Brace,
Why?
and Chakra. But by also having a passive 10%
This is supposed to be like
increase to
the
HP,
physical
as well as
sustain
Pommel and
character.
100 Fists as limit bursts,
You're like the
it
good old
ended up
monk
being quite
tank.
representative. Zhao would also have access to some of these abilities, but would have Counter and Brawler, as well as limit breaks that revolved around landing numerous hits in a flowing combination. This approach would then be adopted within both Dissidia Opera Omnia and War of the Visions Final Fantasy Brave Exvius. Each would either resurface prominent monks from the history of the franchise or introduce new
Boom,
characters that would
boom.
exhibit monk traits. And it meant that even though the monk
Oh
was never
yeah,
front and
spear him in the
center,
wall.
assigned as the job of one of the most important story-centric characters, they would still end up being solid representation. And that brings us on to the Final Fantasy VII Remake. Throughout many of our previous videos, especially the Summon Evolutions, we've spoken about how smart,
Yeah, very few
selective,
very
and faithful the developers
abilities
were when it
reappeared
came
because it's
to
not
how
a
they
fucking
presented
RPG
an
anymore. It's an
updated
action
version of
game.
the Summons. Many would bring forth prominent design traits from the initial appearance, supplementing with moves introduced
That's my
as the
biggest gripe with Final
franchise
Fantasy. They
expanded.
just want to be a
But in the
fucking
case of
action
Tifa
game so
Lockhart,
bad.
the de facto
But
monk
they
in
left
the
their
game,
roots.
it's difficult to say that the same approach was taken, at least when looking at superficial elements.
Also, it sucks that you can just let the game
In
play
the original
itself.
game, Tifa had access to
Why
quite
even bother
a
playing the
wide
fucking
array of
game?
moves within her limit break, and very few of them reappeared within the remake. Instead, outside of Somersault and Dolphin Flurry, Tifa was given access to a wide array of original abilities that would actually bring her much closer to the monk job than her original
Just
appearance.
drop the fucking bug.
Unbridled Strength was, for example, a more modern interpretation.
Yo, ladies,
of
if
the
you ever
Focus
need like a
ability.
real man
By
to get
using
rid
one
of like the
ATB
spires
bar,
in your
you would
house,
see her increase
I'll
her
do
Q,
that. I'll
boosting
just
the
straight up
damage
throw it
dealt
over my
by
shoulder and just
non-attack.
drop their
And
ass.
much like some
I do it at
interpretation
work
of
all the
Focus,
time.
it could then be stacked, something that would
It
not
really
only increase
concerns the
damage output
customers,
further,
but you
it would
know,
grant Tifa
ain't no
access
bugs
to an
coming here, they know
ever-increasingly
better.
powerful finishing move, much like Masterful Blitz.
You know, it's
in
all
Final
fun and
Fantasy
games, so the
XIV.
human just gives
Two
you
of
the
these
butt
moves were
buster.
throwbacks. Omni Strike represented Raging Fist, a move
How's he
introduced
do
with
it?
Sabin that became
You'll
his
just have to
current
find
ability,
out.
and Rise and Fall, which served as a parallel
Like
to
Goblin
Beat
Slayer,
Rush,
don't let him
Tifa's
live
basic
because take it as a
movement in the
learning
original game. And with
learning
Starshell
moment.
also used to increase the strength of her next executed command,
Okay, that's
even
kind of
though
sick.
Tifa lacked the internal healing aspect of the job, the damage dealing potential was unreal. Now looking at this evolution as a whole,
If it's like
it's
any
safe
of
to
the
say that
recent
the
Final
monk has had a
Fantasy
rather
games, you just spam
interesting
potions. You don't
journey.
need to worry about healing.
Even though it has been assigned with well-known characters, unlike some of the other jobs we've covered, being a monk has rarely been something that has been character-defining, at least in comparison to, say, the numerous paladins and dragoons we've seen over the years. What's quite interesting, however, is that
Yeah,
there
they
have
had a
been
lot of
numerous
they had a
thematic
lot of
influences, and as
they had a
developers
lot more
have
going
attempted
for
to
them.
lean further
Of course, they
into
were in
these,
original
it's led
class.
to a huge volume of abilities that have become associated with the job over the years, as well as lots of different visual designs. We've also seen some monks wielding weapons, some fighting barehanded and having their raw strength determine their damage, while others have used hand-to-hand weapons to enhance theirs. Others have seen
Yeah,
holy
'cause it's
lightning
easier.
baked in as a fundamental aspect.
It's
Even though
easier
not
for
all have
balancing.
incorporated notions of internal healing, one thing has almost always remained. Monks are capable
Oh, it's
of
easier for
dealing
balancing,
incredible
and you
amounts
know,
of
it just
damage,
feels sick when
and
you
are
have
amongst the franchise's
beat
most
ass
powerful
like
damage
fist
dealers,
weapons.
even if they are sometimes glass cannons. If you've made it to this part in the video, we really hope you enjoyed this evolutionary study, and if you did, please do consider giving
Man,
us a
she
like.
is fucking that
I'd also
Tonberry up.
recommend that if you do enjoy
And
our
she's almost dead.
evolutionary videos, that you
That's a
check out our
Tonberry.
Patreon, as supporters get exclusive voting rights about what evolution topics we cover in the future. Alright everyone,
Exclusive voting
this is Daryl
rights.
signing out. I'd like to extend a big thank you to all of our Patreon and YouTube membership supporters, especially Anthony Hoffman, Benjamin Snow,
You know, if you
Tobias
guys
Stephen
like them, go
Gregory,
check them
who
out
are
and
super
support them. They
special
do a lot
only
of good work.
supporters.
A lot
And
of
of course,
like,
a big thank you to everyone for watching this
I don't know if I
video.
want to say
I'll see you all
historical
again
work, but
soon
definitely a
for
lot of
more
archival
final
work.
fantasy goodness.
Even making like books and shit. But yeah, you know where we gotta pause this. Y'all know where we gotta pause it. That ain't right. I know you're here somewhere. Why's my mouse not working? Nope, that ain't it. There we
While
go.
Rising
There he
Phoenix
is.
would allow Sabin to do, and has since become quite famous due to a certain.
There we go. That's a good place to end it. Suplexing the ghost train. But yeah, overall, I was not expecting the Street Fighter combo move and like the crazy amount of abilities that they actually have. I really like that. There's a weird like learning aspect to it that I enjoy. And it reminds me of I played quite a bit of the Dragon Age Inquisition multiplayer when it came out. And I really like the deal. Oh, I liked the Rogue, Isabella, and the Virtuoso DLC characters. I played the Keeper because I like playing my supports. But the Virtuoso, dude, I went so fucking hard as the Virtuoso. I was like constantly just strumming and playing songs, adding buffs. They're like a cool support character. But their big thing was like, okay, you had like 3 notches, and each of your skills was like a combination. So you went like fire, fire, fire. It would shoot a fireball. Or if you went like ice, 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 everyone around you would get like a small sheet, like overshield. And then of course, you know, you can mix it up, you know, fire, ice, ice, fire, lightning, ice. And that was just a cool concept. But oh, I really do like the monk that goes on here. I love that they took inspiration from fighting games and the combos. And there was a bit of the, it kind of also leaned in on like the multi-hit DPS character, right? The dual wielder. You do probably less overall like upfront damage, but you know, you get those hits in and they start adding up. That kind of DPS. Overall, love the monk, love all kinds of pugilists. Other than that, I don't really got anything else to say other than thank you all so much for watching. If you have any recommendations where to go from here, let me know, because I think Monk was the last one on my checklist. So I'll probably just pick one at random or just see what there is. Summoner could be interesting. I'm curious to see how that gameplay goes, because I see a lot of times Summoner's just like I snap off a good chunk of my mana bar and you all take big damage. And of course, I'm a big Final Fantasy X fan. Probably my favorite one I've played. Granted, I have not played a lot of Final Fantasy games. I've played 10. I played 13. And I played the Bravely Default and Octopath games if you kind of want to like add those. They're Squeenix RPGs. Okay, more Bravely Default. It's based off the Final Fantasy 4 5. I'm saying 4. The Final Fantasy 5 system of job switching. But yeah. Y'all are super cool. Thank you for going on this journey with me. Again, yeah. You guys are all super cool. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye. Oh, hi. You need this more than me. Did you just hit me with a frying pan?